Round 7 of the 2023 MotoGP World Championship has passed, and it was a weekend filled with action, mixed conditions, and a new winner being crowned at the Sachsenring. So let's take a look at the 5 things we learned from the German Grand Prix. Marquez goes MANIC. As I said in the preview to the race weekend, when someone says Sachsenring, the first thing you kind of think of is Marc Marquez. He's a rider who's been dominant at the ring in the past, 13 or so years since he joined MotoGP, and even before then, actually. And so, you expected him to do well this weekend. But instead, Marquez had a terrible weekend. He crashed 5 times, 4 before the sprint, and 1 in the morning warm-up that led to him breaking his thumb, or fracturing his thumb. It just was an atrocious weekend, and it's a critical thing to happen because there is another race next weekend at Assen, and Marc Marquez might end up missing yet another round if he decides not to race like he did in the feature race. It's deeply disappointing. Marc Marquez, whether you love him or hate him, he's still a personality in the sport, and a lot of people do go to these events just to see him. He's kind of, in some ways, the new Rossi, you could say, being the most experienced rider on the grid, the one with the most titles, and a lot of people want to see him win yet another one. So it's sad to see Marc possibly out for the race next weekend as well, and just shows again how terrible that Honda is, that it's injured 3 out of 4 riders in the Honda lineup. It's not good from them. Yamaha testing. We've talked a lot about Yamaha's struggles, but we saw again just how deep those struggles go this weekend as they started to test different aero components during the race, which really shows that a team is struggling. A little bit of testing maybe sometimes happens in races, but generally speaking, teams like to go with the parts they know best, with parts that they've developed and know work for the races, because races, you pick up points. But Simon Crafar noted before the feature race, that Yamaha was testing 2 different rear wings between Fabio and Franco Morbidelli's bike. And that just shows that they're desperately trying to find anything to make that M1 go faster. It is good to see that they are trying new things, but it shows just how far Yamaha has fallen, and is pretty sad to see once again. Aprilia falling back. We were hopeful at the start of this year that MotoGP wouldn't become a Ducati Cup, and that Aprilia and some of the other brands would still be able to take the fight to them. And whilst I don't think we're quite at the Ducati Cup level, Aprilia has been falling back throughout the season so far. The last 3 rounds in particular have been rather disappointing. This weekend was the same. I know Aleix Espargaro is injured, but generally speaking, all the guys on the Aprilias were just struggling a little bit, and it was sad to see because this was a track that Aprilia last year was doing quite well at. They were running in the podium positions and, doing generally a pretty good job. So to see the best result for them being a 10th place in the feature race was a little bit worrying, to say the least. Aleix Espargaro has been complaining about the Aprilia bike, particularly in relation to the launch device. We know that KTM and Ducati have a very good launch device, and, Aleix says that his launch device on the Aprilia is probably the worst on the grid. So that is a little bit worrying to hear. Aprilia need to start bringing some upgrades if they want to get back into that kind of fight for the podiums and things like that, because the launch is critical. Some changes needed. Something that was very clear this weekend was Ducati dominance once again, and this is a track where historically they haven't done so well. Pecco was second, Jorge Martin 2 wins, and really the biggest thing was that 8 out of the top 9 were all on Ducatis. It does make me think that perhaps Dorna needs to look, not for this year, maybe not for 2024, but 2025, at loosening the rules around the concessions to make it easier for manufacturers to fall back into those concession rules, just to help support them and help make sure that no one is falling too far behind. We're in a peak age of competitiveness in MotoGP, and it would be a shame to see that lost because one team has more ability to develop a better bike, and you only end up having the people on those bikes being able to fight it out. We don't want a class where it's a Moto 1.5 like Formula One has, where you have one or two really competitive teams, or in this case manufacturers, and the rest struggling behind. I've been thinking about this a little bit more as of late, simply because, of course, the two Japanese teams are struggling. We've seen Aprilia falling back, as we've discussed, and I think it's important, with so few manufacturers on the grid now, to make sure that we're getting enough riders capable of competing on enough different machines, so we've got that broad range of capabilities, and it keeps the racing interesting, giving more people, different people to support, and you know that everyone can get on the podium despite their machinery, just utilising different strengths in different ways. A new contender. Finally, we have a new title contender. Jorge Martin in the last couple of rounds has done an excellent job. He's been on fire, and this weekend was just pretty much the perfect weekend from him. The only thing that he could have improved in theory is his qualifying, because he started from 6th. But to take the sprint race win, to take the win from Bagnaia, who, you know, Bagnaia is really fast, was deeply impressive, and he's been rewarded. 37 points, 2nd in the championship. A sprint race win and a feature race win. He's now a title competitor, and it could be pretty exciting between himself and Bagnaia for the rest of the season. Rider of the weekend. My rider of the weekend, I'm going to do it again. I don't like giving it to the race winner, but you can't not give it to Jorge Martin. Bagnaia was seriously fast this weekend, but Martin was tactical, he was smart, he put his bike in exactly the right position for pretty much every corner to make sure that it was as hard for Bagnaia to get past as possible, particularly on those last laps. He, just did an incredible job all around. And so my rider of the weekend is Jorge Martin. Struggle of the weekend. This weekend, unlike Mugello, is to me a little bit easier to name a struggle of the weekend. He didn't even race in the feature race. Marc Marquez. This was a weekend where even if Marc didn't win it, I would have thought, yeah, he's going to get on the podium in at least the sprint, or, probably the feature race. But for him to crash 5 times, to blame Zarco for him, skittling him or whatever. It was just an all-round terrible weekend for Marc Marquez. It couldn't have gone much worse, and particularly considering that it's a track where he has dominated so much in the past, it was just deeply disappointing. Yeah, struggle of the weekend for me, Marc Marquez. Right, and into my predictions. I couldn't have done much worse. My first prediction was that Marc Marquez would win the race. He didn't even compete. I thought he would win the feature race. Didn't even race in it, so that was as wrong as I could get. I also said that Maverick Vinales would be on the podium. That didn't happen as well. The Aprilias were pretty woeful by comparison to the Ducatis and the KTMs, and Vinales in particular seems to be just in a major slump. So, obviously didn't get the podium. His bike also blew up, so yeah, what can you do? And my final prediction, wrong as well, was that we would get a completely different podium from the sprint race to the feature. It was very hopeful. I said that at the time. Didn't happen. The top 2 were in the same position as they were in the sprint. They matched for both, and the only one to change was 3rd place. Jack got the podium in the sprint. Zarco got the podium in the feature. So a little bit disappointing that we didn't see 2 different podiums across the weekend, but oh well, it was a pretty good racing weekend nonetheless. And yeah, those were my predictions. And yeah, that was everything. So those were 5 things that we learned from the German Grand Prix this weekend. We've got one more race in this triple header at Assen, a incredible racetrack with lots of really fun names to say for all the different corners. So that's exciting to look forward to. Let me know any of the things about this weekend that I missed in the comment section down below. If you like this video, do the whole like and subscribing thing. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.